Good evening. You're watching The Big Story with Haryanto Diman. I'm Olivia Quek.
We begin with the latest local COVID-19 updates. The Health Ministry confirmed 632 new cases as of noon today. 9 of them are Singaporeans and permanent residents.
Migrant workers living in dormitories continue to make up the bulk of the remaining cases, and the full breakdown of the new cases will be released later today. Singapore now has a total of 19,410 cases.
In other news, those of us who usually buy fresh produce from wet markets can now do it in the comfort of our own homes. There's no need to jostle with the crowds, especially during the circuit breaker period.
Earlier today, for the first time, 6 stalls from Tekka Market in Little India hawked their fresh produce over a live stream on Facebook. Called Tekka Online Market, the live stream, which went on from noon until about 4 p.m, allows customers to interact with the sellers and buy the items by leaving a comment in the comment section, and the groceries will be then delivered.
Correspondent Eunice Quek tried it out. Have a look.
Well, this is the first set, $10. Anyone wants $10?
Okay, bento for no time to waste. Just say I want one. That looks great. Okay. $17. That's super good deal. But only 20 boxes. Okay. Let's go.
Okay, let me read the name of
Amy.
Eunice, Monica,
Yes!
Susan,
Yes! I got it!
Katrina, Valerie Chen, Virginia, Rosie.
I'm the second person!
My goodness, that certainly looks very stressful. Now, Eunice joins us. Eunice, tell us, what was the buying and selling process like? How was your experience?
It was very entertaining actually. As you can tell, I was genuinely really excited because the reaction that you saw just now, it was actually after I wasn't able to buy quite a couple of other produce before. So it got really exciting after a while. And really it's all about fastest fingers first. Because the sellers, as you can see, they will just put out the produce right there. Then you just talk about, they just mention the name, what it is, the weight, the price, and then you leave a comment in the comment section, and really much just hope and pray that you got what you bid for. And if you are successful, then what happens is you drop a message to them directly in private messaging, and then they will follow up. The backend side will follow up on your order.
As seamless as the process can seem, it doesn't completely replace the actual experience of shopping at the wet market. So Eunice, what kind of gaps did you experience this afternoon?
Nothing replaces going to the wet market really, because there's nothing like picking your fresh produce, speaking to the vendors directly. Here there is some form of interaction. They do reply you verbally during the live stream, but you can only speak to them with your comments. So that's one thing that I think is missing. And the other thing is that bottom line is you do not know how many people you are competing against for the produce. And at certain points, there were 1,000 over viewers for the live stream. And even just a small fraction of that, that's it, you won't get your products because I think maybe because today is the first time, so they have kind of limited the amount that is available. So there were maybe 20, 30 sets of, say, vegetables or fish, and then that's it. And then it's out. And some people buy more than one set. So if they buy 2, 3, if everybody does that, there's nothing left. And so there's a very high chance that after watching for hours, this whole thing kind of ran for almost 4 hours, right? You may not get a single item. So you have to be mentally prepared for that.
Yeah, but did you manage to get anything though?
Yes, I scored a vegetable box from Chia's Vegetable Supply. And I also got a snapper from 81 Shengyu. Yeah. And what I like about it is that, I mean, I haven't got my produce yet. It's probably on the way now because it's supposed to be same day delivery. But what I like is that, I mean, without this, I would have never probably bought from them ever. I wouldn't even have known that this stall is around because I would just go to the market that's near me. So it helps that now, I have another place to go to in the future.
Right. And Eunice, wet markets are usually frequented by the older generation who may not be as tech savvy. This platform wouldn't then capture the usual wet market demographic. But in the same vein, this novel way of taking wet market shopping online may attract other groups. Would this new way reshape the wet market shopping experience for consumers, you think?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think so because you definitely get a younger, more tech savvy crowd, and these are the people that already buy a lot of stuff online, right? And also probably the same crowd that would typically go to a supermarket maybe over a wet market. So to see what really goes on in the wet market without actually being there, there's a good taste of what you might get in the future. And I think this style, the auction makes it a lot more fun. Although a bit stressful, I must admit, but more fun and entertaining. I know of people who just go on live streams like this just for the entertainment value. Like they're not actually buying anything, but because some of the vendors can be really funny or they can be really entertaining, or they just want to see what is out there. And then it's like, hey, it's maybe the new way of kind of window shopping in a sense. Yeah, and on the other hand, this could also see maybe the older generation wanting to be more tech savvy as well. So say maybe I could next time maybe rope my mom in to kind of watch it together with me, and then she can decide whether she wants something. Yeah, and yeah, that could be quite fun actually.
Well, Eunice, the online experience may also be challenging for the sellers who aren't tech savvy, and language can also be a barrier, as well as the lack of face-to-face communication. So do you think these barriers of entry deter sellers from adopting this new way of business?
Yeah, I think it will take a while for them to maybe get used to it. But I think with what Tekka Online Market is doing, when people, see what is going on, the vendors, even just normal consumers, when they see what's going on, how successful it can be, then yes, I think they would be keen to adopt it. And when they see that, sales actually pick up, that actually are people, wanting to buy their produce, then it could work, I think, pretty well. Because it helps a lot that if there's a younger generation helping with the tech stuff, right? So actually all they need to do is just sell their produce. And if that's what they have to do, they don't have to worry about administration, they don't have to worry about the tech, what's going on in the back end and all that. I think that could really help a lot and gain a lot of visibility for them as well. I think what is important is that it's not easy to talk on the live stream for hours and to also sustain the viewership. So there have been some Facebook live stream sessions that I've seen before. As the live stream goes on, the longer it goes on, the audience just whittles down, and how much that actually translates to sales as well. It's a bit kind of up in the air. But I think for a situation like this with the Tekka Online Market, these are established vendors that you can trust, and that's really of the utmost importance. So you need to know that the quality is there. You're not going to get something very different when your delivery arrives. I'll see later how my delivery comes. Yeah, but to host it could be quite challenging, I guess, with the hosting part. So I think that's why when you have another host online together with you, the co-host, that could help, say any dead air or whatever, it helps a lot.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Eunice. We were speaking to Correspondent Eunice Quek on wet market stalls going online to woo shoppers during the circuit breaker.
In Parliament today, Parliament will soon be able to meet in multiple locations if necessary. A new bill will allow members of Parliament to take part in the proceedings across 2 or more places appointed by the President. This arrangement will last for 6 months.
In the context of the COVID-19 situation, separating members into cohorts and limiting the physical contact between these cohorts allows us to cut down the chance of infection spreading to all the MPs. In other words, the whole of the political leadership of the nation, government, as well as opposition. If one cohort is infected, other cohorts can still carry on.
In other parliamentary business, the online citizen has applied for a judicial review after the government flagged several of its online posts as fake news. The website made false claims on the annual salary of Temasek's chief executive, Ho Ching. It was among 4 parties that were issued correction directions by the POFMA office.
Experiencing slower internet during the circuit breaker, Minister for Communications and Information S. Iswaran said that telecommuting and home-based learning have led to a surge in traffic. However, this remains well within the network operator's capacity. MCI and the Infocom Media Development Authority are working with telecom operators to increase the buffer of their network capacity.
And the sale and slaughter of live animals such as soft-shelled turtles at wet markets here is under review amid efforts to improve safety standards. MP Louis Ng noted that the risk of disease transmission posed by the wild-caught animals is very similar to what started the COVID-19 pandemic. In response, Senior Minister of State for the Environment and Water Resources Amy Khor said that there is little risk of disease transmission associated with these animals and that there have been no cases at wet market stalls.
Still at home, a Singaporean woman who allegedly failed to wear a mask at Shunfu Mart was charged with offences today, including 1 count of being a public nuisance. Paramjit Kaur was also handed charges under the COVID-19 Temporary Measures Act. Kaur will be remanded at the Institute of Mental Health and will be back in court on May 19th.
Separately, a 61-year-old man was arrested for attempted murder after he allegedly stabbed a safe distancing enforcement officer from the National Parks Board, who was putting up safe entry signs along the Sungai Serangoon Park connector. The man, who did not wear a mask and was cutting plants illegally, turned aggressive towards officers who approached him, and he attacked one of them with a sharp instrument. The man will be remanded for further investigations, and the police will seek a court order to send him for psychiatric assessment. He's expected to be charged in court tomorrow with attempted murder, and this carries a jail term of up to 15 years and a fine.
Meanwhile, Communications and Information Minister S. Iswaran today sent a video message to migrant workers to assuage the concerns of those living in dormitories. Speaking in Tamil, Mr. Iswaran explained the need to test them and their co-workers and said that the government has undertaken numerous efforts to enhance the quality of food and facilities within their dorms. A second version of the video, dubbed in Bengali, was also sent via WhatsApp to the workers. Let's go to Dylan Ang for what's making headlines around the world.
Thanks, Haryanto and Olivia. All Malaysians and foreigners entering Malaysia via Johor will still need to be quarantined, despite the relaxing of the Conditional Movement Control Order. This was reiterated by Johor Menteri Besar Hasni Mohamad, who stressed that the state has to continue to ensure its border security. These people will have to serve their quarantine at state-provided centres. 15 children who have had the coronavirus were recently hospitalized in New York City. They had a mysterious syndrome that doctors don't yet fully understand, but that has also been reported in several European countries. Many of the children aged 2 to 15 have shown symptoms associated with toxic shock or Kawasaki disease, a rare illness in children that involves inflammation of the blood vessels, including coronary arteries. None of the New York City patients with the syndrome has died. In the latest in the ongoing war of words between the US and China, Chinese state broadcaster CCTV attacked US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo over his insane and evasive remarks on the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Pompeo had said on Sunday that there was enormous evidence that the virus had originated in a lab in Wuhan. This adding further fuel to the theory that has been heavily pushed by the Trump administration. CCTV's harshly worded commentary cited the executive director of the World Health Organization's Health Emergencies Program, who claimed that the virus is natural in origin. That's it for our global updates. Back to you.
Thanks, Dylan. Moving on, most venues in Hong Kong will be allowed to reopen from Friday. Sites allowed to open their doors when the closure order expires include fitness centres, beauty parlours and cinemas. Bars will also be able to get back to business as long as they operate at half capacity, with each table seating no more than 4 people. But nightclubs and karaoke lounge will remain shut under the new measures.
Chief Executive Carrie Lam also said schools will start reopening from May 27th. Now, the rate of new infections has stabilized in Hong Kong with 1,041 cases and no new ones reported on 10 of the past 16 days. So let's bring in the Straits Times Hong Kong correspondent Claire Huang. Claire, in Singapore, Health Minister Gan Kim Yong said the lifting of our circuit breaker would be determined by 3 factors. The number of cases have to remain low, the global situation, as well as whether there is a system to allow the country to open up safely. So, what factors hinged on Mrs. Lam's decision to relax restrictions?
Well, in her own words, it's not an exact science. So basically, she's saying that it's a balancing act. How so? For instance, she said that scientists are still trying to understand the virus more. But in the meantime, border controls and social distancing measures affect the economy. So people are cooped up at home now, and they want to be able to go out, was what she said. So she said it is very difficult to wait until there is no case at all before the rules are relaxed. So essentially, it's a give and take approach. For example, bars and pubs need to stay afloat, right? And they've complained after forced closures. So they now can reopen for business, but there cannot be any live music, no dancing, and the number of patrons will be capped. Okay, and these measures are basically, imposed to restrict, basically to adhere to social distancing.
And now, Claire, we know Mrs. Lam's press conference was only a couple of hours ago, but what has the immediate reaction been?
Okay, I'm going to break this down into 3 parts. First of all, easing of venues and businesses. So pressure has been mounting for some time, right, on the government to relax the rules. And the forced closures had created some unhappiness among certain sectors, particularly the bars and pubs, right? So this would be welcomed by them. I think they're quite glad that the government is taking in feedback. And the second point about reopening schools, now the Secretary for Education, Kevin Yong, was asked if this was a premature move. But he said that the government is not resuming classes immediately. Okay, he's saying that, the government is giving advance notice, about 3 weeks for all stakeholders to prepare for school resumption. And he said that the government will obviously monitor the situation, right, and adjust the plans accordingly. And also the classes are right now meant to be half day, and they're going to allow the older the higher secondary school students to go back first. And obviously, then it will be phased in June as well. The lower pupils will be able to attend school. The third point, I think, is giving out masks to the needy and to all residents. So the supply of masks will come from various avenues, including government-produced ones. They have ramped up production. Those donated by conglomerates and businesses, those government secured. So at the briefing, Mrs. Lam was asked if she would apologize because this is too late a gesture. So they'll be giving out reusable masks, masks that can be reused up to 60 times. It's locally produced, that's developed. And when she was asked this question at the briefing, she said, and I thought, what she said was quite like upfront, right? Mm-hmm. Basically, that it's not that she's late in handing masks out. It's that I didn't have any to give at that time. So I guess this explains. I mean, this is not uncommon. I think a lot of governments around the world do not have the ability to hand out masks, because of face mask crunch, right? But I think things in Hong Kong have eased. You have a lot of people contributing to the supply now, so I can actually get them in shops in advance.
Right. Well, Claire, before the pandemic hit, hit the world, there were, of course, pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong, which rocked the city for several months. So do you think the easing of restrictions has given these protests an opening to come back?
Well, this was briefly touched on by Mrs. Lam, who said that easing of rules did not have any political considerations. What I will say is this, with or without a rule, the cap on the number of people in public gatherings um, will not deter hardline protesters who want to come out. But I think we need to consider this as well. If the Labor Day long weekend is any indication at all, the turnout may likely be smaller than what we have seen last year, because definitely on because of the pandemic, and because people are more aware, and they want to avoid crowds for that matter. So what we need to look up for in the coming days and months will be dates like June 4th, June 12th, July 1st, and things like that. These are considered big dates to watch out for, and that will give a better indication of whether protesters will take to the streets again.
I see.
The last time you were on the show, Claire, was about 3 weeks ago. Since then, Hong Kong's cases rose by around 30. Singapore, on the other hand, well, we had 3,000 plus cases when we last spoke, and that number has ballooned exponentially. As you know, the majority of the cases here have been linked to foreign worker dormitories. How did Hong Kong manage to avoid a similar crisis within its migrant worker population?
Well, Hong Kong has a migrant population, obviously. They're mostly domestic helpers. If you look at Singapore, you have both domestic helpers and, the dormitory workers, the workers living in dormitories, basically in construction sector. In Hong Kong, construction sector relies on locals and mainlanders. That said, I need to flesh out this particular point is that, um, you know, uh, Hong Kong has other problems. For example, if you have things like coffin homes and subdivided flats, where many people are squeezed into one tiny space, correct? So that's the same concept as dormitories, right? Where you've got many people in one living area. So if the dicey bit then comes, if somebody in that space gets infected, so that is something that could happen, that obviously no one wants it to happen, obviously, but this is where I go into the part about how people here have a higher level of awareness. They have and they take more precautions. So because of that, I think that helps, and it sort of eases the situation in that sense.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Claire, for giving us the latest in Hong Kong. As always, do stay safe. We've been speaking to our Hong Kong correspondent, Claire Huang. Dylan, it's over to you now.
In perhaps the first case of its kind, Boaz Ling could be the first baby born in Singapore who's immune to COVID-19. His parents, Pele and Natasha, had flown to Singapore from London just 2 hours before Natasha entered her 36th week of pregnancy. 3 days after their arrival, they both tested positive for the coronavirus. After a month of fear and anxiety, they were cleared of the virus, and baby Boaz was born on April 26th. Here's a look at their story.
And on the flight, there is a Singaporean noodle dish that I love on Singapore Airlines, but I couldn't eat it because I felt sick. And I think it's because I lost my sense of taste and smell, so it just tasted awful, so I didn't eat it at all.
We are very pleased to be joined by none other than the happy parents themselves, Pele and Natasha Ling. Welcome, guys. Now, congratulations on the birth of baby Boaz. Most important question, how is he doing?
Yeah, he's doing really well.
He's sleeping at the moment, so we apologise if he suddenly wakes up and he's got to be fed. But I'm sure if he could answer that, say he wants some more milk.
Now, guys, now we have to talk about the moment that you both tested positive for the coronavirus. Pele, I understand you got the bad news first. What was that like? And do you have any idea how you got infected?
Well, what was it like? We just arrived back from the UK, and so I was jet lagged. I was in a deep slumber at 12 o'clock in the middle of the day, and the phone rang. Natasha picked it up and woke me up and said, "Oh, hey, it's NCID. Your results are through." And I spoke to the person, and initially when they said I was positive, I was panicking, thinking, "Oh my word, what's going to happen? What does this mean for Natasha? What does this mean for the baby? This is stressful." But in some ways, it was a bit bittersweet because in the UK at that point, they weren't testing anyone. So I was kind of thinking, actually, now we're in Singapore. If I've got it, at least I'll get the medical attention and the healthcare to get over it as quickly as possible. So in that way, I was kind of like, oh, this is okay. How did I get it? In a way, we've got no idea. I work for a big church in central London called All Souls, and I'm part of a great team that puts on free English classes. So we get over 100 people every week coming to our free English classes. So maybe someone brought it internationally there, but I think I was probably just very unlucky and in the wrong place at the wrong time, maybe on a bus, touching a sort of bus handle. Who knows?
Oh no, now Natasha, you had to be in isolation for 3 days at NUH. Meanwhile, Pele was initially warded at NCID, so you had to spend several days apart. On top of that, at the time, you were the only COVID-19 patient in Singapore who was that far along in her pregnancy. How terrifying was the whole experience, and how did you get through it?
So I think the only comfort that I had when I tested positive is that I thought I'd be with Pele in NCID. So when I found out that wasn't the case, that really stressed me out, that I was going to be on my own. And I think as a first-time mother, you worry a lot anyway. You worry, is the baby kicking enough? Is it moving? Is it going to be okay? You worry about birth and labor. So to have coronavirus on top of that was quite stressful. I found that quite stressful.
Yeah, it's just to add on to the stress already. Now, tell us about the moment that you guys, both tested negative. Natasha, why don't you go first?
So testing negative while you're in there is like winning the lottery. Like you don't know who's going to test negative. You don't know on what day. So we were I was really excited when I found out I got 2 negatives. But at the same time, I was anxious and sad because I felt like I was leaving Pele behind. And I didn't know when he was going to get out. And I worried about him not being there when I had the baby. I think that was the big thing for me.
Now, how about you, Pele? What was your side of the story?
I think what Natasha missed out is when we were in the hospital, there was this thing that we sort of nicknamed called a false negative. And so many people in our ward would get a negative, then the next day it would be a positive. So it was a false negative. And so when Natasha's first negative came through, all the doctors and the other patients, they were all saying to us, "Oh, don't get your hopes up. Everyone gets a negative." And there were people in the ward that were there much longer than we were. Natasha was only there for 10 days. So I really, I think it must be the power of prayer with so many people around the world praying for us that Natasha got a negative and straight away got a double negative. And so I was a day behind Natasha actually. So when I found out, it was actually late at night. I think at that point there were so many more cases coming through, so the results were taking a lot longer in the lab. So we were expecting to find out about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was 10 o'clock at night I was playing cards with some of the other inmates, as we used to joke, calling each other, and I was alerted by one of our wonderful doctors, Dr. Shobhan. He messaged me and said, "Hey, bro, you're getting out of here. You're going home." And I was over the moon. And we had this great culture of when somebody got discharged, everyone would start applauding across the wall.
Wow.
So we got a little round of applause. You know, it was wonderful. You know, all of us. You know, we didn't have it too badly, but there were others who got it much worse. And you know, we think about all the people in the ICU now, but everyone was really supportive and really happy when you got discharged. We were really sort of, you know, hoping and fighting for each other. We've got a WhatsApp group now. All our friends who were in ward through the COVID survivors.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, guys, what have the, let's shift our attention to Boaz for a minute. What have the doctors said about him, possibly being the first baby born here to have natural antibodies against COVID-19?
Yeah, so I mean, the doctors have been really excited, I think, about Boaz, and all the doctors have been wonderful and supportive towards us, and they've really helped us get through the process. Actually, they've been wanting us to, when we were in there, they were wanting for us to recover before we had the baby as badly as we did. So what they told us is that it is likely that Boaz has antibodies for coronavirus because I had the virus while he was in my belly. So the antibodies were passed from me to him through the blood. So that's what we've been told.
And I think it's been really exciting, really, because, all three of us, and like I said, many of the other COVID patients, we're all able to contribute to the research that's going on in Singapore. And along the whole process, it was really interesting because everyone was learning together. That's the doctors including. Nobody quite knew what was going to happen or how people would respond. They can't confirm with us that he is completely immune and how long the immunity would last for. They're pretty confident it would, but they think it just follows the pattern of most viruses. I think what they want to do is try and get a few other results from babies who haven't had it and confirm before they give us that final yes, he's clear. But it's been a really exciting journey, and I think we're thrilled that Boaz here is the youngest person in Singapore to be contributing to research in Singapore against coronavirus. And so yeah, he's sleeping at the moment, but he's doing very well. This little
he looks great. He's our little superhero with superpowers and everything.
Exactly.
Now,
Times article said that he was oblivious to it all, and I think that's right. This is little oblivious Boaz, no idea what's going on, but he's absolutely.
I'm sure you have a lot of good stories to tell him when he's a bit older and he can understand a bit more.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, guys, what are your plans as a family now that the dust has somewhat settled? Although I wouldn't quite say that, considering you have to care for a newborn now.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been quite nice actually over the circuit breaker to have quiet time to spend with the family and to for Boaz to get to know two of his grandparents and one of his. So that's been quite nice. But obviously we're really excited for him to meet the rest of his family and our friends in person.
Yeah, it's been exciting because we never planned to have the baby here. We were planning to have it in the UK, and so it was a bit exciting trying to sort of set up a baby shop here as well as in the UK. But I think we've just got to wait until things become clear. We're waiting like everyone else in Singapore and in the UK. And when it's safe to do so, as Natasha said, we're staying with family here at the moment, so it's nice that we've got them. But Boaz has 7 great grandparents, and he's met them all over video call. But we can't wait for family and friends to meet him. And I think although we're being told we're most probably all 3 of us immune to the virus, it doesn't mean we can't carry the virus. So we've got to be careful, and only when it's clearly safe to do so. We'll try and introduce him to his great-grandparents, both in Singapore and in London.
Well, Pele and Natasha, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us your amazing story. We wish you and Boaz all the very best. Now, there's a link to their incredible story in the description below if you are watching us on YouTube. Back to you, Jan and Olivia.
Well, thanks so much, Dylan. That was indeed a very incredible story. Now, in other news, former Workers' Party chief Lau Tia Kiang has been moved to a general ward after spending 5 days in the intensive care unit. In a statement today, the party said he was moved the day before and is likely now to remain there for a few more weeks to recuperate. Mr. Low has been warded in the ICU after he hurt his head in a fall at home last Thursday.
Now, this just in as well, couples who plan to tie the knot amid the COVID-19 outbreak will be able to do so virtually. A bill just passed in Parliament will allow marriages to be solemnized remotely. At least one party has to be a Singapore citizen or permanent resident. It is likely to start from mid-May and may extend beyond the circuit breaker period.
And those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com. And if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, do tap on the red subscribe button below if you're watching us on YouTube.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quek. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.